1894. Russian armored columns roll into Grozny, the capital of Chechnya. Tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, thousands of troops. Moscow expects a quick operation, a show of force, maybe a few days of fighting. Instead, by New Year's Day 1995, burning Russian tanks are scattered across city intersections. Entire units are cut off. Some conscripts don't even know where they are. This is the First Chechen War. And the real question is this: how did a small breakaway republic of about 1 million people fight the Russian military, one of the largest armies in the world, and force it into a humiliating ceasefire? To understand that, we need to talk about collapse, urban warfare, and one recurring nightmare for Russia, Grozny. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, it didn't just dissolve politically. It shattered. 15 new countries emerged. But inside the Russian Federation itself were autonomous republics. One of them was Chechnya, in the North Caucasus. In 1991, a former Soviet Air Force general named Dzhokhar Dudayev took power in Chechnya and declared independence. Moscow said no. For a few years, Russia was weak and distracted. Economic crisis, political chaos, power struggles in Moscow. Chechnya, meanwhile, slipped into lawlessness. Rival militias, kidnappings, smuggling, armed factions. By 1994, Russian President Boris Yeltsin decided enough was enough. He believed a quick military intervention would restore control. That assumption, quick and easy, sets the tone for the entire war. And it crashes into Grozny. Grozny isn't just a city. It's the political center, the symbol of Chechen independence. Control Grozny, and you control the narrative. It's also dense. Soviet-style apartment blocks, factories, oil infrastructure, wide boulevards, concrete everywhere. For tanks, cities are nightmares. Urban terrain limits visibility. Tall buildings create kill zones. Streets become corridors. Basements and rooftops turn into ambush points. And Chechen fighters understood this immediately. Russia sent in roughly 40,000 troops for the initial invasion in December 1994. Units came from different military districts. Many had little coordination. Some were undertrained conscripts. The plan was simple: advance into Grozny from multiple directions, seize key government buildings, crush resistance. It looked organized on paper. In reality, communications were poor. Maps were outdated. Units didn't even always know which other units were nearby. And the Chechens were waiting. On December 31, 1994, Russian forces pushed into central Grozny. One of the most famous disasters involved the 130 Honest Maikop Motor Rifle Brigade. They advanced into the city center, expecting limited resistance. Instead, Chechen fighters hit them from all sides. Here's how the ambush worked. Small teams of 3-5 fighters, RPG-7, anti-tank launchers, machine guns, snipers in upper floors, fighters in basements to hit vehicles from below. They targeted the first and last vehicles in a column. Once those were destroyed, the rest were trapped. This isn't random chaos. It's textbook urban anti-armor tactics. Within days, dozens of Russian armored vehicles were destroyed. The Maikop Brigade suffered catastrophic losses. Precise casualty numbers vary, but it was one of the worst single-unit disasters for Russia in the war. Grozny had just shown what it could do. Every major turning point in the First Chechen War runs straight through cities, especially Grozny. Russia had tanks like the T-72 and T-80, infantry fighting vehicles like the BMP-2, heavy artillery, great in open terrain, terrible in tight city blocks without proper infantry support. Chechen fighters avoided open battles. They let armor come deep into the city. Then they attacked from angles Russian crews couldn't see. Urban warfare neutralized Russia's biggest advantages. And it kept happening. After the New Year's disaster, Russia changed tactics. If pushing armor into the city didn't work, they would flatten resistance first. Artillery, multiple rocket launchers, airstrikes. Grozny was bombarded heavily in early 1995. Human rights groups later described massive destruction and civilian casualties. Exact figures remain disputed, but the scale of damage was undeniable. Block by block, Russian forces advanced behind heavy fire. By February 1995, they captured most of Grozny. But holding a destroyed city is not the same as ending a war. The Chechen fighters were not a conventional army. They were a mix of former Soviet officers, local militias, volunteers, and foreign fighters. They lacked heavy armor. They lacked air power. So they avoided direct, large-scale confrontation. Instead, they used ambushes, hit-and-run attacks, snipers, roadside bombs, and mountain sanctuaries in southern Chechnya. When pressure was high in Grozny, they slipped into the countryside. When Russian forces spread out, they struck supply lines. This is classic insurgency logic. Don't defeat the army head-on. Make the war too costly to continue. Southern Chechnya is not flat. It's rugged, forested, mountainous. Villages like Vedeno and Shatoy sit in terrain that favors defenders who know the ground. Russian forces tried to push into these areas in 1995, but heavy armor struggles on narrow mountain roads. Convoys become vulnerable. Helicopters help, but weather and terrain limit them. Chechen fighters blended into local populations and used the mountains as staging areas. Urban warfare hurt Russia in Grozny. Mountain warfare drained them outside it. Russian troops in 1994-1995 were not the Red Army of 1945. Many were young conscripts, poorly trained, poorly equipped, sometimes unpaid. Reports from the time describe low morale and confusion about the mission. Chechen fighters, meanwhile, were defending their home region. Motivation matters in irregular warfare. This doesn't mean one side was better. It means incentives were different. And in close quarters urban fighting, morale and initiative are huge. In June 1995, Chechen commander Shamil Basayev led a raid into the Russian town of Budyonnovsk. Fighters took hundreds of hostages in a hospital. Russian security forces attempted assaults that failed. The crisis ended in negotiations. The incident shocked Russia. The war was no longer distant. It was inside Russia proper. Public opinion began to shift more strongly against the conflict. Wars aren't just fought on battlefields. They're fought in media and politics. By 1996, Russia controlled Grozny. On paper. But control was thin. In August 1996, Chechen fighters launched a surprise offensive back into the city. Once again, urban warfare. Small units infiltrated, set up roadblocks, attacked Russian positions. Russian forces found themselves surrounded in parts of the city they supposedly controlled. It was 1994 all over again, just with more rubble. The fact that Chechen fighters could retake significant parts of Grozny after nearly 2 years of war showed something critical. Russia had not broken the insurgency. In late August 1996, negotiations produced the Khasavyurt Accord. Russia agreed to withdraw forces. The final political status of Chechnya was postponed. It was not a formal independence